Eric Miscoll with EMS Now, and welcome to this edition of the virtual Eric Miscoll Show. We do it again every 2 weeks here. Appreciate everybody joining in today, and I'd like to, as always, thank my co-host Phil Stoten for rising early in the morning tomorrow and joining us. So
you're very welcome.
Yes. Before we begin, before I introduce my guests, let me just say that all of the audience will be on mute. If you do wish to pose a question, you'll have to fight Phil and I for airtime, but you can submit that via the app or the question tab at the bottom of the screen. And this is being recorded and will be rebroadcasted on EMS Now as soon as possible. The focus of our discussion today is on the role of inspection and also the data that it provides in the future of a digitally transformed manufacturing world. So our guests today, who I will introduce in alphabetical order so as not to show any favoritism, will be on my left, Juan Arango, the General Manager for Co-Young Americas, representing the SPI and AOI side of the house, and also Dr. Bil Cardoso, founder and CEO of Creative Electron, representing the X-ray side of the house. So gentlemen, thank you both for taking time and joining us today. Appreciate this. To begin, I was just going to ask, as we always do, ask each of you just to introduce yourselves and whatever you care to tell the audience about yourselves, but also your companies in brief so that they understand exactly who you are. And Juan, why don't we begin with you, since you're the nicest dressed guy on the screen here. So
that's fair.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Juan Arango, and I'm the Managing Director of Co-Young America. I've been blessed with being with this group for 6 years after a long stint in the mounter business. Co-Young America is part of our Co-Young Technology headquartered in Seoul, Korea, and they're an industry pioneer and a leader in 3D inspection, primarily SPI and AOI. This year happened to be our 10-year anniversary of Co-Young America, and we were going to do a big thing. How about 2021 is now our target?
Yeah.
11 is a new 10, Juan.
Yeah. And I'll donate one of these casks for your party there, okay? Bill.
And that gets you an invitation.
Yes, thank you.
Forgot to say Juan's the guy with the best haircut in the group here.
Yes.
So I'm Bil Cardoso. I founded Creative Electron 12 years ago now. And we specialize in X-ray inspection. So AXI is what we do for a living. 2020 has been a very interesting year. I think we'll have a lot to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah, I think you had a fascinating year, Bill, and actually it's interesting. Both of you guys took part in my EMS at Sea Level series. But one of the really interesting things I found when I was talking to you, Bill, was this whole idea that you started the business in a garage, and as soon as you got a whiff of COVID coming through, you started hiring garages for your staff.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah, so once we, it's one of those things where, as a business leader, we have to keep an eye on what's happening outside, right? So you could see the clouds shifting and things getting, weird regarding shutting down businesses in California. And when the pivotal point for me was when the sheriff department went to Tesla to shut them down, right? When I saw that happen, I said, okay, this is real. So we started recruiting and finding garages close to our assemblers and our engineers' houses so that we can, when the inevitable thing happened, which ended up happening March 19th, which is the shutdown of business in California, which we had to shut down. So what we did is beforehand, we started moving our production line to these local garages. So instead of having a manufacturing line, we ended up with several manufacturing cells from southern San Diego County all the way to North County. So we ended up with 10 or 12 remote manufacturing cells. And we operated like that for a good 2.5 months, almost 3 months. And we had for Juan, you're gonna like this one, for supply chain management, we had a truck going to all these locations, right? We had McMaster Card delivering parts all over the place. So it was a very interesting experience, but at the same time, we didn't stop production, and that was the objective, right? You have to keep, we discussed the 20-mile march, and that's something I really, I have that embedded in our culture is you don't stop, you figure a way to keep moving forward. You can go a little slower, but you have to keep on moving.
Yeah. Wow.
And one, it is all about that continuous march forward. And you've had an interesting year, and you were just saying that Q3 could actually be a better Q3 than last year.
Correct. For us, similar to what happened with Bill, we shut doors for both Guadalajara office and Atlanta, March 13th, a Friday. And I basically told, hey, if somebody needs something from the office, come get it on Monday. You're not allowed after that. The state did not close like California did. But one of the things that we did, obviously we don't make machines here, is we started pre-ordering machines from Korea because we figured there'd be a supply chain issue. So let me get my order in first.
Yeah.
And that helped us with Q2, especially at the end when things started to open up. I had inventory, but you know, since mid-June, it's been a steady flow. And like I was saying earlier, Q1 was somewhat flat from last year. Q2 was definitely, 30% less. But we're looking at possibly even double-digit growth from Q3 last year.
Wow, that's crazy.
My guess is we'll finish at 8, but I have to be optimistic and go for that double digit.
Go for that double digit.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, let me jump in on that one. So because I'm curious about what the forecasts are coming out of COVID for the growth in your spaces there. So and what is driving that? So
okay. So a couple of things. We had a lot of, let's just say, seeds in the ground during Q2 that got put on hold. So that's some of it. The other thing is that COVID has actually provided business for us. We've had a lot of people that retooled their manufacturing facility to build respirators, to build POSs, to just, it's a shift in the business.
Yeah.
We actually now are working with a global leader of POS that was successful in China, was successful in Europe. Now they're setting up in the Americas. So it's just, COVID has provided some opportunities that, that's, the other thing is reshoring. Things are coming back because the world, America's without a doubt, but the world doesn't want the dependency in China. We saw how that went. So because of that, inspection plays a key role because we in the Americas can't have waste. So for the inspection business, that's going to be huge because when they start bringing things from China, they probably have lines that, they put several people to visually inspect. But let's face it, the technology today, you've got to have some great eyes to be able to inspect.
Yeah.
Oh, great equipment, right? Now,
so
you have, we're experiencing the same things, but one thing that I notice, and I'm curious to see if you also notice in your business, is significantly increased interest in remote technologies, everything to do with giving engineers and technicians the ability to do their jobs from home or from a remote location. Are you also seeing that uptick in interest?
Now, one thing that's helped us is we have a team of 6 people that their job is to do remote help, and they log into, they dial into the machine and they do all the stuff. The challenge is installing a new machine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's in our list of things to do figure out how we can do remote installations, because we do have customers. I'm still sitting on close to 40 machines that we've sold in this year that they won't let us in to go install it.
Yeah.
So we have had some customers install their own with help from, but to me, the next step is probably figure out some, call it Google glasses.
Yeah,
So
some
the
VR
technician
solution.
at the customer provides eyes to my guy at his desk.
Yeah.
And I actually have an engineer on that project right now. We're calling it enhanced remote support and remote installation.
Yeah. So Bill, what are you seeing in terms of that remote demand? It's obviously something that's been on your mind.
Yeah, so it's it's interesting. We've, you know, for the longest time now, we've been talking about a lot of concepts related to virtualization of the data flow, right? And how, you know, from the digital twin concept to how we can decouple the physical machine to the analysis, data, and decision-making process, right? Because for the longest time in the SMT industry, those two things coexisted, right? So we sold boxes with data that existed inside those boxes, and an engineer or a technician would have to look at that box and make a decision if something was good or bad. So we've been working in conceptualizing for many years now how that can be decoupled, right? So we have a piece of hardware that sits on the line that collects data, and that decision-making process, that transition from data to information, can happen somewhere else or by something else, right? If you're talking about AI and machine learning. So a lot of those concepts we keep talking about now are being requested, right? Now we have engineers at home, and a line that had maybe 4 or 5 people now has one person operating the line, and that decision-making process now cannot happen at the line anymore. It has to happen somewhere else. So we've been getting a lot of requests on how to, you know, make those concepts a reality, you know, within a couple of days. Of course, we don't have any time anymore. So it's been very interesting, that shift, right, in business model for us, because now we have an opportunity to monetize on a virtual service instead of monetizing on a piece of hardware. And so, and at the same time, it opens up to different modalities of engaging our customers, right? So not only we can provide those remote engineers with data, but then how can we provide them with more than data, but just some information of other pieces of equipment on the line. And I think it's a, you know, like every disruption, right? You have negative things and you have some positive things. The decoupling of the hardware and software and the algorithms might have some very positive consequences to our industry. You can think of, you know, a fairly quick adoption of centralized decision-making data center, right? Instead of having everything local, where you make the same mistakes in 5 different locations where you have an SMT line.
Yeah. Well, we all know that data is where the real value is in the factory now. That's the, you know, that's the fuel that that runs the factory. So the idea of data as a service is really interesting. What Juan was saying and what you're both saying is really interesting. There's obviously certain things that are impacting demand, and there's that pent-up demand as a result of POs being put on hold in Q2. There's that retooling for different products, which maybe identifies a greater need for agility and flexibility. And then there's that reshoring impact. They're all having that thing. What I think is really interesting, Juan, is very early on, you just started ordering machines. And do you think it's a situation where fortune favors the bold? You've got to make some pretty brave, bold leadership decisions that, or you had to, certainly in Q2. And that must have felt like a gamble when you went ahead and said, I'm going to order all of the machines that are coming out of Korea, so I don't get left short.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that, as Bill was saying earlier, we now have to make quick decisions with less information. It's almost like rolling the dice. Go, our position was our machines are not custom. So we looked at our pipeline, and the sales team, we had many teams meetings and went opportunity by opportunity and finally identified and said, okay, guys, order all those.
Uh-huh.
And what happened was a lot didn't come in Q2, but once Q3, I'm still getting emails. Thank you for having the machines so quickly for us.
Yeah.
So it's you roll the dice, but we were confident that this was going to come back.
Yeah, and again, with what Bill's talking about, bold new business models, business approaches, that idea of the servicification, if there is such a word, of parts of your business and the remote factory. It's been such a disruptive influence, and like you say, some parts are coming out of that disruption as, hey, we really learned something here, and we learned something that's that's beneficial. We can be more agile. We can be perhaps a little bit less dominated by bricks and mortar and real estate. And I think a lot of businesses are learning that. One of the things I just wanted to check in on the disruption is, how's that impacted product mix, both from an X-ray point of view, but also, the mix between AOI and SPI? Has that been changed a lot, Juan?
For us, it has. The goal was always to be 50-50 SPI and AOI. Now, because SPI is a much more mature and saturated market, Dr. Ko understood that at some point, and right now, AOI is double what SPI is.
Okay.
So in a sense, it's good for us because the AOI is more expensive. So selling less units, we still achieve the same revenue.
Yeah.
For us,
what about you, Bill?
At the XI. Yeah. Since we don't sell anything else, we still own it.
Yeah. But what about application? Are people looking more for inspection, or are you seeing a rise in counterfeit and a demand in that side of things? What are you? Is it impacting the demand?
Yeah, the demand. It's an interesting question. The one thing we cannot neglect is the set of industries that COVID created, right? Juan was talking about the POS. I mean, those are things that didn't exist. Medical device manufacturing exploded with COVID, right? So there's a lot of opportunities there. And with those, we sell the vanilla, the standard AXI system, right? Goes in the back of the line and look, inspects boards as they come out. We also have other markets, right, outside the SMT line that also have been impacted by COVID, positively or negatively. One that we play quite a bit in is kind of like you mentioned, for electronic components. Yeah, that spiked, right? Every time you hear supply chain disruption, think counterfeit components, right? Because every time there's a gap in the supply chain, it's going to be filled by criminals, right? Then they will have whatever you need for sale.
Yeah.
They will figure out a way to fill that gap. So yeah, that has spiked, and the other area that we've been playing quite a bit is in the supply chain for e-commerce, right? So in that regard, we've been very successful helping companies identify that the product's being returned to them. So that's reverse logistics, what they call. So basically, it's the person that buys an iPhone and returns a fake iPhone and pockets the real one, right? Believe it or not, that happens a lot, right? That's millions and millions of dollars every week those companies lose because of that. So what we do, we X-ray the returns and make sure that they are using AI and a bunch of other algorithms, figure out that what you're returning is what you say you're returning.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
So that also has exploded quite a bit.
okay.
Okay.
Let me, we're talking about the importance of information and the data that's being gathered, but it's almost a double-edged sword for testing, I think, in that the more data that's being gathered, I mean, how is that, with machine learning and AI, is that going to allow for predictive analysis that somehow impacts the whole testing market?
Well, the goal is always to have accurate, good data, good results, good information, right? Mm-hmm. So with the AI and machine learning, the goal is to facilitate the user's experience in them not having to make some of these decisions. The effort from our Kira group in San Diego, who owns the AI and machine learning portion, is what's pushing for smart factory, for the K-Smart, the auto programming. Now they just came out with we used to call it CCI, then we called it something else, DPI now. It's the inspection of translucent fluids, so conformal coating.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the pin machine as well. So these are things that are maturing at a quicker pace because of the need to get it, we don't have time. So that's one of the things that, if we think, like I tell people in Korea, sometimes I think, God, my job is tough. I'd hate to have Dr. Koh's job right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Developing the next product.
But Bill, how do you see that? If Juan's SPIs become so good and generate so much data, does that almost become a threat to the X-ray side of it?
I was thinking about your question. It's actually a very provocative question, Eric, as usual, right? I mean, you can take that question and think of it, society in general, right? We have a lot of data being generated constantly, right? I mean, we have kids and they're watching YouTube, they're consuming Netflix, Hulu, and everything else. The amount of data available is infinite, right? There's no way as a society we can consume all the data we create, right? So we have to get really good at consuming the data, right? And making that transition between data and information, which is something we can act on, right? And that's where companies like ours and Co-Young, right? That's where that's our job is going to be. The data we create hasn't changed much, right? I mean, it hasn't really changed. We didn't double the amount of data we've been creating in the last 10 years. We haven't. But what we have done is created technologies, algorithms that can take that data and inform the user, right, in an intelligent way.
Something
So,
with it.
And then your question, it's a very good question. When is there going to be a pivotal point where one of these techniques, right, is going to get so good that it's going to render the other ones obsolete, right?
Yeah.
It can happen, right? You can argue that pick and place and stenciling is going to get so good that you don't need inspection, right? And that's an argument that our industry has been doing for 40 years now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many
not
papers
nailed
have I read about in the 80s saying, well, pick and place is so amazing now and stenciling is so great. You don't need AOI. You don't need SPI. Who cares about X-ray, right?
Yeah.
Mounters do that claim, though. That is
Well,
true.
and they have been doing that for a while, but guess what? We're still here.
Yeah.
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 Well, it's
And our machines are getting
reality.
better. So something is happening, but because every time you forecast technology, right, it's very easy to make mistakes if you do this flat line projection, right? Saying, oh, we have today, we can do this really well. In 5 years, this is going to be so good that everything else is obsolete. It so happens that teenagers, they want to watch 8K video on a phone. For that to happen, 5G, 6G has to happen. For that to happen, you have to be able to basically have a nuclear power plant on a device in your pocket, right?
Yeah.
And for that to happen, it's going to get harder and harder to package those things.
Yeah.
So you can't project a flat line. It's always this hockey stick, right? And that's where that gap, right, between flat line and the hockey stick. That's where we survive.
Yeah, and you're right. You know, things don't disrupt the way people expect them to. I remember the whole SMT discussion. It was going to be the end of through-hole technology, and there's still plenty of through-hole technology, and there's still demand for devices to inspect through-hole technology, and that will continue, and they won't resolve that. One of the things I'm really interested in when you look at the potential of AI and machine learning is that idea that it manages the majority, and then the individuals that are smaller in number on the line can manage the exceptions that require that human intervention. So I think that's really interesting. But the other element that's really interesting is the ability to blend the data that's coming out of both systems. So SPI, AOI, Juan's already done a lot of work in blending that. But beyond that, somehow someone's got to blend the data that's coming out of the X-ray with that and the data that's coming out of other systems within that, and feed that back to the printer to help the printer improve, or feed that back to the placement to get those offsets right for everybody. And it seems like it's got to deal with all these voices hollering and saying, hey, my bit's not quite working right, fix my bit first. And, you know, another, it's like a, you know, bunch of teenagers hollering their dinner requests, and you've got to figure out what the best solution is. Is that something that companies are working together to do, or does that fall to the MES companies to create that, or big AI operators? Who's taking on that challenge? And
I think we all have to.
Doing it.
I think we all have to, because like Bill said, he makes X-ray. That's all he makes. We just make SPI and AOI. But there's a lot of other pieces in a line to manufacture. We can't push or dictate what they should or shouldn't use. So in our, at least in the Co-Young position, the instruction from Dr. Ko is play nice with everybody. Yeah. And that's where you get into the CFX and Hermes and all those standards. I wish there was only one, because it feels like it's like extra work. But, you know, Bill and I can't push that. We just have to play along. And it's the others that think about a line. Let's just say a line is 2.5 million. If I get 200, 250 out of that, I'm really doing well. Yeah. So I have to be the, you know, the play nice and play with everybody. And that makes it even a tougher challenge, because at the end, we all have the same customers. Yeah. And Bill, when you look at that, you look at that whole line with all those different machines, and there's a whole lot of data coming out of there. How do you blend that data with your own data? Because it's only when data's contextualized that you can create intelligence and insight and make better decisions and make faster decisions. And maybe in that utopian world, make decisions within the algorithms. And it's only when something's way out of kilter that human intervention is required.
Yeah, so we've had some success, more failures than success, you know, attempting to integrate the data. The challenge we have is that the high level data, right? The pass fail, the good or bad, that's easy, right? I mean, we all have it. I think the real opportunity for the line in general, not only inspection, but for the whole line, if you know, from a holistic perspective, the real opportunity is in blending algorithms, right? But as soon as you knock on that door, you have a lawyer shutting it down because it's an IP issue, right? It's a hard shutdown. It's not even a conversation. And so I think that's what's keeping this next step of integration from an intelligence perspective to happen, right?
Yeah.
Realistically, if one big company owns everything, then yeah, they can pull it off, right? If they own from the head to the tail of the line, you can integrate the whole dog and deliver it. But I don't think, I don't know if that hasn't happened yet.
No,
it
I don't
hasn't
see it
happened.
happened.
And one of the things that we struggle, as Bill is saying, is the fact that you now have to, it's one NDA after the other.
Yeah.
And for example, we have a lot of companies that, let's just say, I'll use Yamaha as an example. They have an AOI. They third party and SPI, but the customer has Yamaha for placement, but they have SPI and AOI from us.
Yeah.
And we get pressure from that customer to work with Yamaha.
To integrate.
But nobody wants to, the NDA is stuck in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the one who want to wag the tail. We can't wag the dog.
Yeah.
No. That just doesn't work.
No.
Hey,
no.
there was. Go ahead, Eric. I was going to
No.
switch
You
gear,
were
but
meant. Go ahead.
I was going to switch gear because I'm the only guy that's not in the US, and I'm the only guy that's not got a American passport. You've got a presidential election coming up, apparently, and both of the candidates, and I'm not going to get political, both of the candidates are talking a lot about manufacturing and reshoring and manufacturing jobs and the importance of that, and coming up with incentives. What do you? It's kind of a if I ruled the world question, but if it was up to you, how would you incentivize manufacturers? What would you be incentivizing? I kind of feel that the blunt instrument of tariffs and trade wars can be a little bit counterproductive, but maybe that's just me. But obviously we need to incentivize manufacturing in some way. What would you do? I'm going to ask Eric that as well, because I'm in the US.
Oh, in the US? Because you have to be more specific. So, where do you want to incentivize manufacturing?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking specifically. I'm thinking specifically in the run up to the election. What do you want to hear from? What do you want to hear from those guys in terms of the right incentives for manufacturing? Anybody brave enough to take that one?
You know, I'll jump in if I may. First of all, I think that tariffs are a blunt instrument, but it got the attention to the issue, right? And so I know a lot of people don't like that, but it did force the issue. Now we're dealing with that. And that's probably a good thing and a long overdue thing. I also don't think, listen, every 4 years since I can remember the presidential cycle, the politicians of all ilks get up there and talk about bringing manufacturing back. They never did, right? It was talking points during the year. But what's different this year is COVID, right? What's different is what has happened in the last year. Otherwise, I would have expected it just to kind of ride its way out.
Same hurrah.
4 years. I mean, it's been predictable. So I'm not advocating for one or the other. I do think not everything coming here makes sense, right? So, and China will still always be an engine, but I'm not looking for that much in that regards from either of them, because frankly, I don't know that I trust either of them or believe what they're putting out there.
Are you talking about myself and Juan or the?
No. You guys, I trust more because I've broken bread with you. So,
oh, that's a very low threshold for you then, huh?
Bill, we're better candidates than the two they have there.
Well, that's it. Absolutely. I'd listen. That's why I'm asking you guys.
The bar is pretty low.
I'm a believer that markets can be efficient, right? Following Milton Friedman and University of Chicago doctrine of market efficiencies. And I think the role of government is in as much as possible leveling the playing field, right? So you don't have kids across the border doing inhuman work where, for their own sake, of course, but also from a cost perspective. So I think that's the role of government, right? It should provide some level of parity without impacting efficiency, right? And governments, and candidates have said, have lied in the past, saying that they can bring manufacturing back, because in reality, no one can, right? If you trust in the efficiency of the market, the companies are going to go wherever is best for them as a function of optimizing whatever profitability function they have, right? So they're going to go to Panama, they're going to go to Brazil, they're going to go to Mexico, whatever it makes more sense for them, as a very complex optimization function. So governments, I think, have a very limited role, and I think they should have a limited role. So going back to what I want to hear from my presidential candidates is that, and if I had to write a tweet, I would say, leave us alone. Let us develop, let us grow, and make sure the bad guys are at bay. That's it.
That's interesting, Bill, because I interviewed a whole bunch of EMS C-level execs, and their view on incentives is pretty much that. Give us the tax breaks, give us the money, don't use it elsewhere, and because we know how to spend it. We know what we're going to do with it. We know what investments are going to make us more efficient, more effective, more able to grow our business here in the US. What do you think, Juan?
I completely agree. The other thing that we need to do is incentivize. So as you saw the manufacturing leave, we lost a generation of, let's say, engineers that didn't get into this business. And now we have a gap, and that core competence, left us. So we need to reinvest in the people, because let's face it, the US is a very resourceful and entrepreneurial group of people that they may say we're capitalist pigs, but you know what? It works.
And then from that conversation, you also have to go back to a market efficiency, right? So why kids don't become engineers? It's hard, it doesn't pay well.
Yeah.
Why would you become an engineer?
There were no jobs either. Those jobs have left.
Exactly. So why would you become an engineer? Why invest in education to develop people who don't have any jobs, right? So it's all about fomenting and creating this ecosystem that allows companies to develop, and then those jobs are going to come at a higher pay. But let's remember, right, that we're having a discussion, and this is the country where Facebook came from, Google, Tesla, Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So this is the country where these companies have some place to create, despite all the difficulties. Still a pretty nice place to develop a company.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the skill shortage is really interesting. One, I think that needs to be part of it. I think what Eric said about don't build China in the US, it's not a question of doing that. Leave the manufacturers alone, let them decide. I'm, as you know, a big digital evangelist, so I would incentivize anybody that's investing money in digital transformation that will drive efficiency, because to Bill's point, I think that's that's a great way of leveling the playing field.
Only we can survive.
Yeah, absolutely. But you guys are gonna need more software engineers, more AOI guys. You're gonna need more automation operators, more people with robotic skills.
We can't hire.
That's what's gonna level the playing
software
field.
engineers. That's something that's been a challenge for Co-Young for several years.
Yeah, and in being California, you want to be here because that's where engineers like to live. At the same time, you're competing with all these big companies, right? That just can't hire them fast enough. No.
Yeah, and it's not just there. It's the same in Texas where Eric is. Tesla are moving into Austin. That's going to have a big impact on other companies in terms of
Austin is not in Texas.
Being a skill magnet.
Yeah, Austin is not in Texas anymore, Phil. Austin's not part of California. Yeah, we took over.
Okay, you've taken that now.
We redrew the map. Austin is part of California now.
There you go. Look at
That's
that.
fair enough.
Yeah.
So
You were trying to make another point there, Bill, though, I thought.
Yeah, so I think the interesting follow-up question to your question, Phil, that I'd like to hear Juan's and yours feedback is, in an election year, I like to ask our customers, right? How do they see? What are they, expecting? And to my surprise, this election cycle, I see more concern from our Mexican customers than our American customers. They are more sensitive to the change in administration because so the way I read that information, right, is that the reshoring effect that has happened for the past 4 years has positively impacted Mexico more than the US. So a potential change in policy is going to impact Mexico more than US. Is that something you also see, Juan?
Absolutely. But the funny part is it's American companies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
American companies are doubling their footprint in Mexico instead of bringing it here. And because to me, America's is just one big piece.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Wait until the commercial territory, Juan.
Yeah. Well, Eric, we did this show 2 weeks ago with three guests from Mexico. And they're seeing a huge amount of investment, and that reshoring impact, when you look at it in Europe, the real benefits have been Poland, Hungary, Romania, those low cost environments that are in the same region as the high value consumer markets. And that's going to happen in Asia as well, because China's now becoming, one of the world's largest consumers of electronics, but also high value goods. So you've that low cost environment, but I still think there's that opportunity to create a little bit of leveling out and think about the right products that can come back to the higher cost environments, the United States, Germany, countries like that. I started to write a piece the other day, and it was just based on a thought that, and my title hasn't worked out yet, but it started as 2020 has been a shitty year, but I still think the 20s is going to be the most innovative decade ever, because it's really sparked this idea of creativity, not just in products, but just in business models. Everybody's just had to, and you guys are great examples, everybody's just had to be resourceful, they've had to be bold, they've had to be inventive. Do you see it as a kind of a creative spark that's going to drive people forward?
I think it has to, Phil, and that's something that, you just have to do it. And in our cases, we look at it as first surviving, and then you can grow and do everything like that. But for the beginning, it's just keeping the train on the tracks. And, we feel that we have a responsibility to the entire Co-Young family that we call. And, we just have to, tighten our belt and figure out a way. Like I told you earlier, Co-Young has had no layoffs, no benefits cut, no nothing. It's business as usual. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks after COVID, Dr. Ko sent every employee a bonus.
Wow.
Are you guys hiring?
And he sent Eric a few barrels.
Yeah, it's a good question. If you look at the fires here in California, right? The fires naturally have a reason to exist, right? They are a way for the forest to regenerate, right? You burn the top level, and then what's
new growth
can grow and grow stronger. This morning I read a survey by Yelp, and they were saying that in that survey that 60% of the businesses that shut down because of COVID are not opening again. 60%, right? That's a lot. 60%, that's more than half, right? We talk about restaurants, barbershops, nail salons, places that have a very thin, they don't have a lot of fat to survive, right?
Yeah.
So if you put it, so COVID has created this burn, right?
Yeah.
Natural, artificial burn in our business world, right? And I'm a strong believer that what's coming after that is going to be stronger and super, super innovative,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The 90s saw the creation of the internet, right? The invention of the internet that forever transformed our world, right? I mean, we're here today because of the work that's done in the late 80s and 90s to create this ecosystem where we can now have a conversation, right? And have share ideas all over the world in a seamless way. So I think the 20s are going to look much more like the 90s did, right? It's going to be, spur a whole new generation of industries we can't even imagine, business models we can't even conceive, right? That just a year ago it made no sense whatsoever, and now they're reality, right? But with that, we have to burn a lot of ground. A lot of things are going to die,
and that's painful. Yeah,
and that's painful. And I don't want to. And one thing that I read from time to time, and it really bothers me, is this concept that if your business failed, it's because you were not creative or innovative enough. No. Some just had a shitty luck. And if you are an nail salon and you're making, you basically paying your
and
people.
You have to close the doors. Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no creative way out of that.
It's interesting, all the themes here, because they, in some ways, we're talking about the presidential election. We're talking about, the regeneration of businesses and what have you. An old colleague of mine was talking 5 years ago. He thought that the 20s would be the roaring 20s again, right? He wasn't sure what it was. I'm sure he didn't foresee COVID, but was talking 5-6 years ago about when he was looking forward, saying the 20s are going to be amazing. He said the dip before, and it's going to rise up in the 20s again, like 100 years ago in this country, right? So, but the issue I see with all of this is also leadership, right? We're talking about that here. We're talking about the importance of it. We're talking about a Dr. Ko, keeping everybody and sending a check to kind of, keep everybody on board. He didn't need to do that. He could have, kept his powder dry on that, right? I mean, that's an important message to the troops there. So I'm just wondering, for you guys, and you're both leaders and of your companies, maybe not all of Co-Young yet, Juan, but at least of the Americas. And Bill,
just time.
Yeah, give him time. He's charging at it. But I mean, that whole role has taken on extra significance in these times. And I guess I just want to ask you to kind of maybe comment on it and how you've seen your impact during these times.
One of the things that I have noticed is the fact that the leadership team within Co-Young, we talk a lot more. It just, we have to do our what ifs. We have to do our worst case, our best case. The planning is exhausting because you're trying to make decisions with not enough information, no clue of what the future is going to be, and you have the responsibility of the entire, organization. So in some things we've been very conservative, like letting people into the office and safety for us, and that was a directive from Dr. Ko and HQ that safety comes first. But in other things, you just have to, like ordering machines, order machines. It turned out there was a shortage of supply chain in Korea with some of our suppliers. And because we had some machines in the pipeline, we got ours. And that helped us, start in a good footing with Q3. But it's just something that, like I said, I feel terrible for Dr. Ko in what he's going through. because let's face it, there's nothing that you can do to prepare for what we're going through here. This has got to be the most horrendous situation. Think of a restaurant that opened 6 months ago or at the end of last year. What fault could they have? And they could be some of that 60%.
Yeah, absolutely.
So some of the things that we did here is I usually after a quarter, and because we've had a lot of good quarters, I'll take everybody in the office out to dinner. And I had one scheduled, and then COVID hits. So what did I do? I got a gift card for every employee for them to support a local business.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to think about that, don't you? But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's, I think it's fascinating times. Bold, innovative, entrepreneurial leadership, I think, is hugely valuable.
The key is a great team that you trust.
Yeah.
And
you
build a team around it.
When they say that when you get drunk, you change. When people say that, you're a different person when you're drunk, you're not a different person. You reveal who you are, right?
You are who you are. That's right.
And I think this pandemic allowed leaders to really show who they are, right? And gave people that opportunity. And yes, boldness, I think I agree with you, Phil, but I think the critical thing that has helped me and helped us a lot is transparency. It's just, you got to be honest with your people. Of course, and I've always been of the opinion that you don't ask anyone in your team, you don't do anything that you wouldn't do it first, right? So when we had the conversation and we discussed potential salary cuts, I said, I'm going to cut my salary 100% before I cut 1% of your salary. Fortunately, we didn't have to do any cuts or fire anybody or cut any benefits, but you got to be, the first in, the last one out, right? That's how I see.
You're the captain of the ship. Yeah.
Our role, exactly. And if you're transparent and you keep, we do all hands meetings every week, right? Where the whole company gets on Zoom and we talk about what's happening, protests and anything else that people want to talk about. And it's not easy, right? It's challenging to keep communications open when a lot of emotions are fluctuating up and down. But as a leader, I believe our role is to keep the level of communication open, right? And not be afraid to walk through and talk through those challenges.
Yeah. Your team get to learn a lot about you, but you get to learn a lot about your team as well. And as you say, it shows everybody's mettle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's interesting what you're talking about, getting drunk. What is it? In vino veritas, right?
Vino veritas.
Truth, right? And I've always believed that really does kind of show the true self, right? Rather than the lie. And I think
that's why Eric is broadcasting live from his wine cellar. Where he'll be getting at it straight after this meeting.
Yeah, but you forget I once was a drug counselor for many years, so it comes with
the territory.
But on the leadership thing, and just to wrap this then too, it's just, and you both have just demonstrated this in your comments, I think, is that I think the style of leadership that, at least speaking for myself, that I admire the most is humble leadership, right? Not the ones that are out there, look at me, the rah-rah. It's more about you both defer to your teams, right? You both recognize your responsibility, but also recognize, a leader isn't a leader if they don't have anybody following them, right? So it's about the team and who's behind you by its very definition. And I think you both, you gentlemen, I've known you for years and respected you both for many years. And this just kind of reinforces my impression. So anyway, so thank you. And I just want to thank, I know we're way beyond our time here, but I thought it was important to keep it going.
No, great conversation.
Yeah, so gentlemen.
It was 2 hours, isn't it?
2 hours. Nah, not this time. It may get troublesome.
Cater in some wine, then we could go.
That's the
There you
next
go.
time. But well, listen, but I just want to say thank you for sharing for your candor, for your insights. Hopefully next year, I guess it is, that maybe we get to see each other in person again. Although Juan said he's inviting me to Atlanta for an opening or something. So,
Well, if we have the Christmas party, I still
There
have
you
not
go.
canceled it.
oh, good for
Yeah,
you.
Christmas.
Optimism. I like that. So,
Hey, come on, in sales, if you're not an optimist,
yeah. Move
That's
over.
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Phil, any last comments you'd like to share, sir?
I was just going to say the Roaring Twenties starts in 2021, so let's get to it. There's lots of exciting stuff to do, and we talked about pent-up demand. There's definitely pent-up demand for companies that have got great leaders and creative solutions for the market. So, I think some exciting times to come. But yeah, awesome conversation, and thank you so much for allowing me to be part of it.
Certainly. Gentlemen,
pleasure seeing you guys.
absolutely. And listen, we do these every 2 weeks to the audience. Please check your schedule. We have several more of these planned through the rest of the year. Maybe we can catch up with these gentlemen another time too. And as I always close this, be smart and be safe out there. And as exemplified by this panel, stay sexy too. And thank you, gentlemen, all. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Hey,
Okay.
I
Thanks,
hope
guys.
to see you
Take
all
care.
face to face in March at APEC.